Okay.
Welcome to everybody who's just popping in. We're going to give people a few minutes to hop on before we jump back into this second webinar of ours. Dr. Brooks. I always feel like we should have elevator music going at this point.
Let's thank Sally.
Yeah, there you go.
Kara. Well, we have all our internal people. We got two of my best friends on there.
Good.
Share
Lisa, for
the-
next time, if you go to apps in
Uh-huh.
the bottom bar, it actually does give you the option to add music.
There you go. Good to know. Maybe Steady webinars will start to get a little upgrade. Fancy music.
Right.
Yeah, we'll make a playlist.
There you go. And we got some people rolling in. Thanks for joining us. All right. We'll give people just one more minute.
Yeah, I usually give them one or two after
Yeah.
two.
And Jesse, just in case my eyes don't go to it, you can let people in from the waiting room as they roll in, right?
Got it. Will do.
You...
Maybe I should have reposted the original, whatever, postcard onto LinkedIn
Yeah,
last
that's
couple of days. I didn't even think about it.
the good thing about these webinars is everything's recorded and we're going to be sending out emails to everybody to give them all access these videos
Mhm.
on our YouTube channel and in our community. So
Oh, I don't think I saw the links and everything from the last one.
I'll make sure you have them. If you weren't signed up, if you were only signed up to speak and not as a participant, you might not have got
Oh,
that. Might
yeah,
have
because I've got some people that couldn't attend, couldn't sign up, and I know they wanted to see it. So
Sure. Yeah, I can make sure you get those. All right. Got more people. I love this. A long list of names in here.
yeah, I'm usually a 3 minute after kind of person.
Yeah, that's good. Give people a chance to roll in. Well, to everyone who's just joining, we're really happy you're here. Thanks for hopping on to our second webinar in this series, all about boundaries. We're going to go ahead and get started. Yeah, we're just going to jump right in. So, welcome to the Steady webinar series. In this hour, we're going to be talking with Dr. Sally Brooks here about boundaries, caregiver boundaries. And in case you missed it, a couple of weeks ago, we had our first webinar, and that was all about caregiver balance. And Dr. Brooks shared some really incredible insights about how to balance caregiving responsibilities, duties, just that full-time job that a lot of us have as caregivers, with the rest of life that doesn't go away when you become a caregiver, right? So that webinar has already been recorded. If you signed up for it, it should already be in your email inbox. If not, we will send all three of these recordings out at the same time so that you can go back and you can watch these on your own time and get some really great advice, tips, and tricks from Dr. Brooks here. But for everyone who's joining us for the first time, my name is Lisa. I work for Steady, and I will be moderating our discussion today about caregiver boundaries. Our guest of honor here is Dr. Sally Brooks. I went into a little bit more detail on Dr. Brooks's background last time, but she is a geriatrician with a very long and impressive professional history, and she even has a personal history with caregiving that makes her extra qualified to speak on these topics. And Dr. Brooks will tell you about that in a minute. But one of the reasons that we love working with Dr. Brooks at Steadii is just because she's been in the rooms with these caregivers for decades, helping them make informed decisions about their own lives and about the lives of their loved ones. And we can't think of anybody better to be here kind of speaking on this subject. So welcome, Dr. Brooks. Thank you for being here.
Well, hey, thank you for having me back. And it's a real honor for me to be able to talk to our participants that may be caregivers or know a caregiver. Um, over 30% of persons that are employed are unpaid familial caregivers at home. It's a huge number and impacts so many people, the parts of their lives, financially, mental and physical health. It's a very, very important topic. I just like working with Steadii. I'll just tell you why. It's a great, interesting, diverse group of people, but we all have one mission in mind, and that is to make the lives of caregivers better, make them feel like they're more capable and have time for themselves. It's a very, very strong.
Thanks, Sally. No, we appreciate that. And we're going to get to Steadii. I kind of jumped in that, showing off the logo here. We're going to get to Steadii later on in the webinar. It is a completely free service. We have capacity to bring caregivers on for free right now, so you are not going to get a long sales pitch from us. But before we get to that, let's talk about boundaries. First of all, can you recap a little bit about your professional experience with caregiving, and why supporting caregivers is so important to you?
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I became a professional caregiver way back in pharmacy school. I came from a small town and started in pharmacy school and thought I was going to be a pharmacist, and still am, just not licensed. And really was during my pharmacy school experience in the summer, I worked for a family pharmacy. We still did home deliveries, knew all our patients by names. And I went into a home of an older woman who lived in very sparse surroundings. It was very evident that she was lonely. And, I thought about that and I said, wow, here's a really neglected population. And whether it's an older adult or somebody else who's vulnerable, regardless of their chronologic age, it made me get to think about this is sort of an ignored group.
Yeah.
Much like I feel about caregivers. And I contrasted that with my grandmother, who's a role model for me. You got to love her name, Izzy, is her name. And she really had a tough life. I mean, at one point, my grandfather was an alcoholic, even had a little jail time. And here she was raising 3 kids, 3 different jobs during the Depression. Grandfather became better. She had a little better lifestyle. And she decided after he died, he had chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, that she was too young to sit around. So she went back to work. And then she worked 25 years as an assistant in a stockbroking firm.
Wow.
And that gave her a lot of, made her feel valuable. She was the antithesis of being lonely. She had a family. And so I think I really, understood that advocacy is so important. And you have social support. Some people don't, but at the end of the day, there's many caregivers and of different stripes with different situations, and just a very important population not to ignore.
Yeah, for sure. And so in addition to watching your grandmother, you then had some personal caregiving situations arise in your own life. Can you tell us a little bit about the situations you found yourself in?
Sure. Thank you, Lisa. When I was 28, I believe I was still in medical school, had to go back in my brain. And my mother had her first bout of really severe depression. And I remember I was in school and, dad was sort of understood what was going on, but not really. found her a psychiatrist in Columbus, Ohio, which is near to my small town where we grew up. And the psychiatrist said, look, she's really, really depressed. She needs to go in the hospital. And so from that point on, I tried everything possible to keep my mom from getting depressed.
Mm.
Now, the problem with that is it's going to happen.
Sure.
You know, she was very compliant with her medicine. She wanted to get better, but, you know, the chemical imbalance would just overwhelm her. And so it did encourage me 2 years later. You were never going to change that trajectory, right?
Sure.
But through her life, through different experiences of her life and mine, there were ways to change my caregiving style and contribution with mom. And then fast forward to about 20, I'm going to say 2002. My dad was a very intelligent guy, worked outside his whole life. I noticed that he wasn't reading every night. He read every night. He would come home from working out stores, come in, and I picked up early because at this point I was a geriatrician. He had dementia. So I was managing both of them still they were in their small town, 2 hours plus away. And I had toddlers at the time.
You're busy.
So it was a big juggling act. So I can say that I've had a lot of experience in speaking with my patients' caregivers, but being a caregiver myself.
Yeah.
And even though I know how the system works, or somewhat so, and I know how to advocate, and I know enough about the medicine part to know, oh, this sounds right, or it doesn't sound right, they're still my parents. And so
Mhm.
there were a lot of just real feelings there. And my caregiving style, everybody has a different caregiving style, and that's something Lisa will talk about here in a minute, is just pull up your big girl panties and get on with it.
Sure.
And so I did. You know, but I was surrounded. I've always been surrounded with a very deep and broad net of friends who were so good to allow me time to spend time on myself. And so that's another thing we're going to talk about here. But I have a lot of experience with it, and my friends and family have a lot of experience with it because they were all in there with me in the village.
Yeah. Sounds like you had a really great support system. And so many of the things that you are talking about are just reminding me of things that we talked about in that balance webinar. So if you haven't watched that yet, we will send out the link to that on our YouTube channel because there are a lot of nuggets that Dr. Brooks has in there. But I do want to shift us a little bit to this conversation about boundaries. And boundaries is one of those words that people have a lot of preconceived notions about, right? Some people are all for really rigid and tough boundaries. And for other people, that kind of sounds like a scary word that maybe makes them feel like they're shutting people out or they're being mean. But can you just kind of give us your definition of what a boundary is for a caregiver and why they're necessary?
Right. So when I think about boundaries, it's really something that I think caregivers take some while to understand.
Yeah.
All they know is they're starting to get tired, they're overwhelmed. They feel guilty because they're tired, and they feel a little bit resentful of the caregiver. And it just becomes all one big blur. And so a boundary allows you to stay in your wheelhouse so you can be more effective and preserve yourself. But it also allows other people around you, the care partner themselves, family and friends that are diving in. We're going to talk about employers, sort of know what their role is.
Sure.
And so I look at it as a positive thing. But I do think people that are caregivers tend to say yes a lot.
Sure.
And there's a book I love. It's an old book. It's called When I Say No, I Feel Guilty.
Oh, okay.
And it gives you tactics about how to say no in a way that's really productive and positive. So I've always looked at boundaries as being positive, but it took me years to learn. You know, it's an evolving skill, I guess.
Yeah, it can be a tough one. I think one of the best pieces I've gotten of advice that I've gotten is that boundaries, even though the word sounds like it's something that separates you, it actually invites more connection because you're able to be clear and kind all at the same time and set these boundaries around your life that like you mentioned, equip you to show up better for your loved one and show up better in your caregiver role because you're not so burned out because people are just chipping away at you. So I'm excited to get into this. We're going to go through a few different categories of people in your life that you might have to set boundaries with. And as we know, and as you already stated, many care partners are employed and they are juggling a full-time or part-time job, and they might have to talk to their employer about changes that are happening at home. Can you talk a little bit about how you would go about having those conversations with your employer and maybe what some appropriate boundaries to set with an employer?
Yeah, and I think when any of us think about having a critical conversation with our manager
Yeah.
about, I have a limitation,
Mm,
there's something I need you to know about, we instantly go to that part of our brain that says they're going to think I'm going to slack off,
yeah,
right?
totally.
They're going to think that about me. Um, what I would say to that is, as a manager of other people, when somebody told me that there was a dilemma at home, my first response was thank you.
Mm,
You know, I knew something was a little off. You know, my job's to help you succeed.
mhm,
And it's really important that I know this. And the reason you want to do this is you want to be able to keep your job and feel
mhm,
happy about your job and not have it be just one more thing that's overwhelming. Um, and your employer wants to keep you. I
yeah.
mean, retaining employees is very important. It's adds to quality. It adds to, you know, retention is very important, no matter what field you are. And so I always have a critical conversation. I follow the sandwich model.
Mhm,
And the sandwich model is the two pieces of bread are kind of the good stuff. And the stuff in the middle, it could be that mystery meat that you got in grade school in the sandwich,
yeah.
um, is the stuff that's top, right? And you've got to get to it. So I guess if I were going to approach an employer critical conversation, I would say, you know, I really enjoy working here. Like,
Mhm,
I love this job. I love the fact that I bring unique value here. I think I'm an important piece of the puzzle. However, I need to tell you, I have a big challenge at home.
mm,
And it could be, I'm just going to jump in there. My parent has cancer and
mm,
they've come to live with me from another state. And I am dedicated to doing the work. I'm going to need some flexibility of schedule. And
mm,
right now, I know you've been really good about giving me projects, kind of career ladder projects, because you know I'm good at it, you know I can get it done. But right now, I'm going to need to focus on my core job.
mhm,
Okay, so then what's last slice of bread? You come up with a solution. So I'm thinking Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'm going to start early and kind of go home midday. And then because some of my work is clerical or think time, I'm going to make up for the rest of it after my loved one goes to bed. So that's sort of a way I would approach it.
yeah.
Um, and I've had to do that a couple times in my life. But I will tell you, the first time was because my manager called me out on it,
Really?
and something is not right.
Wow.
Because again, I'm gonna pull up your big girl panties and just deal with it.
Mhm,
Um, but I think it took somebody that knows me well to
sure.
say, hey, hold on a minute.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I think the other thing that I'm noticing in your example is maybe some of us are guilty of trying to guess what their response is going to be, or we're already writing the story of we're going to lose our job, we're going to lose their trust, we're going to lose whatever. But in reality, we haven't given that person a chance to react in their own honest
Mhm.
way, and their reaction might surprise you, right?
Right, right. Yeah, the first time this person was kind of one of my tougher managers.
Yeah.
And so I did a little dress rehearsal with myself.
Yeah.
But he was very empathetic. I was surprised,
Yeah.
really.
Because you never know what they're going through in their life. They might
Mhm.
understand more than you realize, which is true. So I love that. So to kind of sum that up, don't be afraid to ask. Maybe practice ahead of time, but go in with that sandwich model and talk about, go with gratitude, go with positive things to say about your manager, your your company, the work that you're already doing, state the problem, and then bring in your own options, your own solution, and like help brainstorm and come up with things. Did I kind of summarize that okay?
I think you did. Yeah.
Cool. As we're going through these topics, I want to encourage people, there is a little chat button down at the bottom. If you want to drop questions in there, we can get to those throughout, and we will have more time at the end for question and answer. I've got a couple Steadie friends in there helping me watch the questions. So feel free to hit that chat button, drop a question. We will get to it by the end. But let's go ahead and move from employer over to general boundaries around family and friends. So many of us have a whole life with a whole bunch of responsibilities, and we're used to showing up in a lot of different ways. And then when caregiving tasks increase on our plate, sometimes it's hard to set boundaries just around those, especially if they're the type of person that people are used to, like you said, you saying yes. So how do you set boundaries in everyday situations when people are really vying for your time and resources?
Yeah. And so I think what we're talking about now are friends and family that are in our circle, but they're not necessarily going to play a caregiving role. Is that sort of
Yeah,
what
we're going to get to that
talking
one.
about?
Yep.
Yeah. So, one of my friends is on this webinar, and another friend's on the webinar that used to live in this neighborhood as well. And we all three are kind of known as get things done kind of people
Yeah.
and social. And so we found ourselves planning a lot of social events in the neighborhood.
Mhm.
And frankly, because we're good at it, we could get it done, and it wasn't terribly overwhelming.
Sure.
But I'll never forget this story. There was another neighbor in town that didn't work, had no children, and we had thrown a similar party a few years before, and she said it related to a movie. She goes, "Hey, that second movie's coming out." She goes, "It would be great if we had that party again." And she's looking right at me. And
Yeah.
I said, "You know what? That is a grand idea. And I'm going to help you. Like, I'll be happy to bring something to eat." But I knew where she was going.
She
And I'm
wanted you
thinking
to.
in my head, I am the last person that should be throwing this party right now. I'm
Yeah.
working, I'm traveling, I have a family, I'm taking care of my parents. And the old me would have said, "Well, let me see if I can get something together." And no way.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah.
And it goes back to that when I say no, I feel guilty book.
Yeah.
But don't let yourself be that person. Just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's an example that I have.
No, I think
Another one I think I'm going to think about back to my kids
yeah.
when they were younger. And I had twins and another one 23 months later. So I had three kids pretty close together. And, the girls came home and they're like, "Susie's in brownies. Her mom's the brownie troop master. And we
Mm-hmm.
would really like to be in the brownies." Now, I was a brownie, I was a Girl Scout, and I know that a big part of that is as a parent, you are to pitch in and participate. But I
Sure.
didn't kind of have the work life that I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I basically said to them, "Why do you want to be a brownie?"
Mm-hmm.
They're like, "Because Susie's doing it." And I said, "Well, let's talk about it." And I said, "Here's the thing. It's not going to be fair to the other mommies." I said, "But I'll work something out. But part of this is being with your mom too." And they're like, "You know what? We really weren't that crazy about it." So I didn't say no, but I pointed
Yeah.
out that, there were some things to consider. And my natural inclination would be, well, sure, let's add that one to list and fit that in
Yeah.
on Tuesday,
Sure.
But now if it was something they really want to do, I mean, trust me, they did other things. We had competitive cheer, we had competitive dance, we had drama. You find a way to get it done, but it's a boundary helping them set a boundary to know what's really important to them too.
Sure. And it sounds like, because what we don't want to do is swing all the way to, well, I'm a caregiver now, so you have to start saying no to
Right.
everything. Because some of these things are
Right.
going to bring you joy too. So
Right.
how did you find good ways to quickly prioritize those? Or did you have any strategies for saying, yep, this one I want to do and I'm going to claim it and I'm going to do it, and this one, maybe not so much?
Right. I think this part of this is kind of blended if you're an employee,
Sure.
which is what things are on your table at work that you look around and maybe somebody's on your team and it could very well be delegated to them. Like they're
Sure.
ready with the energy, right? And so I think that's part of how you pick and choose is what is it that you can kind of do in your sleep and maybe somebody else could do it. And I think that's maybe how I made priorities. I think the other thing we all need to know about ourselves is we all have strengths
Yeah.
and we have innate strengths.
Mhm.
And so I'll plug a book. It's called Strengths Finder 2.0, or I think the
Yep.
original version was called Now Discover Your Strengths. And it's a short book, which I need, attention
Yeah.
span. It's about this thick, about this big. And you read about 75 pages of it, tells you about how the research came up with these different characteristics that people uniquely own. It was done by Gallup poll research. And then you take a test and you find out these characteristics if you use those talents in whatever you're doing. It doesn't say, okay, you've got these characteristics, you should be a lawyer. It's not that. And then it explains how you can overplay them. So when I think about priorities, I go back to how I'm wired. And I kind of go for the ones that come easier to me,
Sure.
that give me pleasure.
Mhm.
And that's sort of how, in general, I prioritize things.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And sometimes it helps to, sometimes the answers for ourselves aren't really cut and dry, and it helps to talk it out with someone who can be kind of a sounding board. And I don't want to get ahead of us again, but we are going to jump to that at the end. Part of what Steady does is it pairs caregivers with an advocate. And the thing that I love about our advocates is they all have caregiving experience of their own. So they get it. They understand. They've in some way been in your shoes, and they also have professional experience as either a therapist or a caseworker or social worker or someone in mental and emotional health field. And these are the kind of conversations that a lot of caregivers have with their advocates. I've got this long list of things to do. I don't know how to prioritize. I don't know what I should let go, what I should say yes to. And the advocate can be like, all right, bring up the list and let's talk it through and just kind of be that sounding board and help them come to the answer themselves. But just kind of be a second set of eyes and ears on the situation. So again, I digress. We'll get into that at the
Well,
end.
and I'm going to go forward because I know you're going to talk about Steady more, but part of that is knowing your friend's strengths
Yeah.
too, and who you're going to call upon, which your advocates relay. But most importantly, part of Steady is actually evaluating caregivers and
Yeah.
see how you're wired. And
Yeah.
so that whole concept of I'm going to show this caregiver all their strengths,
Mhm.
and I'm also going to tell them these are the things you could let go and give
Sure.
it's a back and forth of tips. And so that's what I think is unique. There's other programs that support caregivers, but for me, it's typically, and I'm not bashing the Alzheimer's Association. I've been very involved with them, but it's less about here's your loved one with dementia and here's the resources for dementia. This is more about, oh, crud, your dad has dementia. What are we going to do for you?
Yeah.
So I think that's what's unique. And that's why we're talking about what we're talking about. It's really more about the caregiver at this point.
Yeah.
Um, but then I got ahead of myself there. And I think I'm starting to venture into friends and
Yeah.
family that are going to share caregiving responsibilities.
Absolutely.
And so I think a lot of people have a hard time asking for help
Yeah.
in general, especially if it's something personal. So maybe you have someone at home that has memory difficulty or they have a physical disability. Maybe you have to do something very clinically intimate, like a ostomy bag or something like that. And I do think that people say, "Oh, it's a little embarrassing." Dad gets kind of feisty at night. And they don't really want to put that on anybody else.
Mhm.
But I'm sure they have people that say, "What can I do for you?"
Yeah.
Oh, that's okay. And actually, what you should do is you should write a list of
Mhm.
everything you need to get done,
Mhm.
you know, You got to at least throw laundry in a couple times a week. You've got to, and you create a list. And when that friend comes to you, you say, you know what? A couple times a week, could you come over and throw the laundry in for me?
Yeah.
And that person's going to say yes. They don't
Mhm.
know what to do for you.
Yep.
And so I got pretty good at being definitive. My
Yeah.
example is when you have a newborn.
Mhm.
People flock around. Babies are so exciting. What you don't need is somebody to come to your house and hold your baby.
Yeah.
You need somebody to come to your house, throw the laundry in, and while
Bring-
you're taking a nap, hold the baby.
Yeah.
That's what you need. And
Yeah.
so I find that being very specific about it, even though it might not be our nature, is probably one of the most helpful things you can do.
Sure. Well, and all of this also allows other people to exercise their gifts and talents too, right? I know my dad, my brother ran into a time where he needed a lot of help because they were dealing with some family situations. And my dad isn't really a nurturer, but he said, you know what I can do? I can mow the lawn. And he was over there every week and he was happy to do it. And he felt like he was contributing to
Right.
that. And it saved my brother a ton of time. So asking for that isn't necessarily a sign of desperation. It's just, hey, you said you wanted to help. I'm going to go ahead and give you a job.
Right. I'm famous for making food. I make a lot of soup, and I have a lot of soup in the freezer. So people know me as the person that always has the soup,
Yeah.
when somebody needs a quick meal. I think though that, those friends and families, you have to be respectful of how much time they too have too, right? And boundaries
Absolutely.
around that. And I find that I have some friends on this call who want to help so many people. Like they're so good at it. But even friends that are involved in your caregiving situation needs to create those boundaries for themselves too, so they can
Sure.
continue to be a really valuable helper.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We started to get into this a little bit, but I know a lot of caregivers that come through Steadii. One of the major pain points is when there are multiple voices trying to have opinions, make decisions on medical care or how mom should be cared for, or how dad should be cared for. And sometimes those opinions don't align. So,
Correct.
in general, how do you approach conversations with family and friends who are sharing in caregiving responsibilities?
And being on the physician side, I had to be sort of the quarterback and
Mm,
helping families figure out who that was. So generally, here's the scenario, right? There's 1 to 2 caregivers that are doing the heavy lifting. One may even have that person living with them. And then
mm,
there's the brother in California.
yeah.
It's always about the brother in California, who comes at Thanksgiving, comes at Easter, and sees a big difference
Mhm.
and says, "Oh my gosh, like this person needs a full workup, and what are we doing?" And you're sitting there saying, "We've been all through this, and we've done it once, we've done it twice. What I really need from you is to get on the bus and be
Yeah.
where the rest of us are on the bus going in this direction." The best
Mhm.
way to do that is you have to pick your quarterback. You have to
Yeah.
pick the person who's driving the bus. Now
Mhm.
that can cause some angst, well, and I'm not a mother of boys, so I'm probably overgeneralizing here. But I hear that moms tend to favor their sons, and the son in California could do no wrong, right? And so your fear would be, well, I'm the one here helping her on and off the toilet and whatever. Is she going to pick him,
Yeah.
right? So the way that I do this is I would bring the family together. And it's kind of good to have this objective third party. It doesn't need to be a doctor necessarily. It could be somebody in church community or a really good friend. And you just kind of ask the question, like at the end of the day, if you're a tight spot, who's sitting here is going to help you?
Mhm.
Now, I'm not branching into who's the power of attorney for healthcare or the power of attorney for finances. That's parallel and important, but this is getting that person to say, well, in a pickle, it's that person.
Yeah.
Then they pick the person, but for the right reason,
Yeah.
right? And then that person does have to be strong enough and flexible enough to say, I hear you. You validate what you hear. However, in working with the doctor, this is what we all decided we're going to do moving forward.
Mhm.
So validate what they're saying, but you got to get them on the bus. Like,
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Are there any strategies for delegating jobs or communicating more with people who might be far away or might not be as involved, but still care just as much?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, again, look at who the parties are. You know, the brother is a CPA. What's the brother going to do? Right?
Yeah.
He's manage the finances. And when the healthcare copays come in, he's going to figure all that out. Right? You're playing
Find their strength. Yeah.
and I've already kind of got pegged out. I have 3 children. I kind of already pegged out. I know who's going to do what. Like there's one who's just going to come around and make me laugh a lot.
Sure.
Like that person. There's another person who's going to be really pragmatic, do what needs to be done, nothing more, nothing less, just boom, boom. And the other one is really good with finances. So I can see like they're all going to have a different role. The good news is they're all 3 on the same page, at least this time, right?
Sure.
So
That's good.
now, if you don't have children, this is tough, right? So I'm the power of attorney for 2 different people that never had children for healthcare, obvious choice. But I encourage them to select somebody in their family to help them with the finances. Niece, nephew, whatever.
Yeah.
So it's possible to do it even when you don't have children or you don't have a friend that you've known for years living next door. It's possible to do it.
Sure. I imagine that sandwich strategy comes into play here too, because if you are talking to brother, sister, friend in another place and you can sandwich it with that gratitude, I'm so glad you care so much. Remind them we're all on the same team. We all want the best for mom, dad, whoever. What I know that you're better at than me is X, Y, and Z. Can you take this?
Yeah. And if they're in town, just say one of the big things for me is getting mom around.
Yeah.
If you have a driver's license, you know how to drive a car. Pretty basic. So if I have to drive her there and be there, that doesn't let me get the stuff done around here that I need to do, and or if I have a job. So it's even things like that. Or, mom needs we need groceries here once a week.
Yeah.
Right. Now, of course, it's easier, right? You can order online and they show up at your door. But you have to go get groceries once a week. Can I give you my list? So just things that they're doing anyway, like lump into that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Do you have any, I didn't prepare you for this question, but do you have any advice if there is a conflict and things do get heated? Do you have any advice for how to diffuse that and get back to the relationship and stuff?
That's when I would deploy an objective third party, not really fully objective third party. Like you probably have a friend that knows some of your family members. And you could say, hey, we're all going to get around and talk about this, and pick a friend who's been through it themselves.
Sure.
Like this happened in our life. I like, if you're in a faith community, if you're in, your doctor for one, or a lot of times they have an NP or a PA or somebody that would join a conversation. I think it is good to have a third party to kind of help diffuse. So I guess that would be my suggestion. And have an agenda. Like I know that sounds weird for a family meeting, but like, hey, these things are coming up and I'm wondering if we can all talk about them. So nobody's surprised. Like, what are we going to be talking about? So there's an agenda. And then you say, hey, I've asked, my neighbor who just went through all of this with her mom to join us, because I think they could be really helpful.
Yeah.
You don't want to bring some to a meeting that's going to be critical and then just like surprise the heck out of them. Like you don't want to do that. You want to let them to mentally prepare.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. And having that agenda, I imagine, and if you're not comfortable saying it and you could write a paragraph at the top that says, hey, I know emotions have been running high, but the bottom line is we all care and love about this person and we all have the same goal. And I want to get us all on the same team. These are the practical things, like separating the emotional and the practical.
Yeah.
Like these are the practical
the other thing, when you invite people to a meeting, I've always done this, is I say, are there any things you want to talk about? Let's make sure we get it in the agenda. right? Horrible, you come agreement on everything. And that one big thing that bothers the brother, you never talked about. So everybody's got to bring it,
Yeah.
what they're concerned about. Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, that goes back to clear is kind, right? If you all know that there's an elephant in the room, but you keep ignoring the elephant in the room and sweep it under the rug, it just gets bigger and
Right.
worse, and it ends up in a blow up later. So,
I
dress,
don't want to give you the impression this is one and done,
yeah,
because what's going to happen with the person you're caring for is they're going to evolve and change as their illness changes. So dementia, that's very familiar with people, how they progress to the other stages, but it could be chronic lung disease. And it could be, we've gone from the stage where they have this, BiPAP at night, and then we've got oxygen, and then we've got the oxygen tanks, and so it's going to evolve, and these meetings aren't a one and done.
yeah,
You'll need to keep coming back together.
yeah. So getting good at it early probably helps too. Getting good at the communication.
One moment.
You're okay. Just a reminder for everyone, if you have any questions or comments, Kelsey, thank you for leaving that little note of encouragement in the comments. That's really great. But if anybody has any experiences they want to share or questions they want to drop for Dr. Brooks, you can drop that in that chat. Running over there.
I saw something in the chat box. Give an example. You want to read it?
Sure. So Kelsey said, this was when we were talking about employers. She said, I just shared with my manager last week. My manager said I was a vital part of her dream team, and she will do whatever she needs to do to help me. Just some encouragement that it does work. So yeah, maybe we just need to give our managers a little bit more credit.
Right? I love the fact that worked out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'll get over my little moment.
You're okay.
We all have moments.
Take the time that you need.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have covered a lot of ground. This next and final category can be a really tough one, because as a caregiver, sometimes you have to set boundaries with the loved one who you're caring for. And I imagine, just like you just got done talking about, that those boundaries are going to change as whatever disease or issue they're struggling with progresses, right? Can be emotionally loaded. So what are some examples of necessary boundaries to set with your loved one?
Well, I actually have a current thing going on in my caregiving life. My in-laws, my father has Parkinson's, my father-in-law, and he had a complex hospitalization, skilled nursing center. And before all that happened, Dad was starting to fail at home. And they live in California. It's hotter than blazes there most of the time. And with his Parkinson's, going from sitting to standing, you a lot of times, you get lightheaded. And so my father-in-law was picking the hottest day of the year to leave the log home where they live and walk into like the shop garage across gravel. And we're all telling him, like, hey, Dad, we'd love to take you out there. We're not going to do it between the hours of this and this, and somebody's going to be with you. And the next thing you know, hey, there's Dad. Like he's headed to the garage, right? Now he's at this point, he was not cognitively impaired at all. He's still doing his stockbroking, whatever. So my mother-in-law is a very strong person. I highly admire her. And she's an artist. And she told me, I just need to get out of here once a week. And she says, he's not happy about it. But I told him I'm going to go and meet my painting friends and paint. And his job is not to do anything stupid. And I said, okay, did you define that? She goes, yeah, you can't go outside. You can't, And at that point, he was cognitively intact, that he didn't need somebody in the house. But I don't know. Sometimes you've got to be pretty, boom, straightforward. And like, you are not doing this. Now, if they're starting to get cognitive impaired, that gets a little tricky. Right. But yes, I will say that my father-in-law is, and it's hard, it's a loss, grappling with the thought that all the things he used to do, 8 years ago, that he can't do them physically. And so that's a loss. It's a grieving for him. And so in his mind, he can still do XYZ. And so this is where therapeutic fibbing comes in. Have I talked about this before, Lisa?
You've mentioned it to me. I'm excited for you to define this and give
Okay. Right. So boy, here's the one that comes up with an older adult, regardless of what they have, is driving. They think they're the best driver in the world. And because they've never had an accident.
Mhm.
It may be true until you walk around to the side of the car and the whole side of the car is swiped off. But it was one of my patients. I walked her to the car. She goes, "No, I've never had an accident." And I'm like, "On that side of the car, you haven't, but on this side of the car, you've definitely had an accident." But and you can, when the driving thing comes up, you can say, "Hey, let's go to the BMV. Like, we should do that to get your license renewed." Okay, guess what? It doesn't work because these lovely little people behind the desk, like
Mhm.
they're not passing the visual test. And they're like, "Oh, honey, yeah, you meant this." So that doesn't always work. So what I'm telling you is it's a contentious thing. You've decided the keys need to go away or they shouldn't drive. This is where therapeutic fibbing comes in.
Mhm.
Okay, so my own dad, for a while, he could drive here in our little community between where they lived, I lived, my sister lives. It's all about a 10-mile radius.
Mhm.
And he was fine to get lost. We weren't worried. And then one night, he's out in the country a little bit. And he goes, "Hey, Sal." He knew how to use a phone. He goes, "Hey, Sal." He says, "I think I got twisted around." He says, "I'm at this place where you have ice cream." I said, "Great." I go, "Why don't you walk over to the guy who's scooping the ice cream and let me talk to him?" You know?
Yeah.
So obviously at this point, the car needs to come away and we went and retrieved him. And so if you say to somebody, "Stop driving," what are the odds that's going to happen?
Not good.
It's not going to happen. So you have to remove the car from sight somehow. You either need to say, "You know what? We really only need one car."
Mhm.
And Susie just got her driver's license. Why don't we let Susie have the car? Our
Yeah.
granddaughter, Susie. Or hide the keys. Now, people say, "Gosh darn it, they find the keys." Well, you got to get a lot better about hiding the keys then. Hide the keys. Sometimes that can get very contentious. Other people have like dismantled spark plugs and things, but I find these the thing, you just get it out of sight. Got to get it out of sight, out of mind. And so that's what we did with my father's car. First, it was a truck, and then it was a car. And my husband, handy mechanic kind of person, and he just said, "Gosh, Joe, boy, they're hard time for that part to come in. Just hasn't come in. It's the darndest thing. They can't find it."
Yeah.
So it depends on the cognition of patient. They might, or your person you're caring for, they may buy it, they may not. But that's what I mean about therapeutic fibbing. It's in their best interest.
Yeah.
So it's a some people call them white lies, but it's something you need to do, or it's just always going to be there. I used to write for prescriptions for patients back when we had paper prescriptions. Now everything's electronically transferred. And I tell the caregiver, "Go home and put this on the refrigerator. It's a
Mhm.
prescription for Dr. Brooks." I didn't say this. Dr.
Mhm.
Brooks did, whether it's about the diet or the
Mhm.
medicine or the car.
Yeah.
I'm not the bad guy. Let's take it up with Dr. Brooks.
Yeah.
So
And
those
someone
are
you
some
can
other
make the bad guy.
strategies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You
Like
told
don't
me.
take it all on yourself, right? Like
Yeah.
somebody else, you need to be the one there 24/7, 365, or hopefully you find ways to give yourself breaks. The boundary here is that um, you're not going to take it all on. You're going to let the doctor be the bad guy.
Yeah.
Or it's a brother or sister and they're like, "I don't want to approach driving." Well, guess what? We're on the same page. And guess what? I'm actually giving this one to you.
Yeah.
Right?
Congratulations.
I mean,
Yeah.
like you're a guy, cars, that's being gender, you know,
Yeah,
and
sure.
discriminating amongst gender. A lot of women know things about cars.
Yeah.
But well, guess actually that one's yours. Let's go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Makes a lot of sense. And maybe just getting over, I mean, it feels a little bit weird to give the advice to lie, but when you're taking somebody's physical safety, or even, I think I remember a story you shared with me about someone who maybe lost a piece of jewelry or something, or they were insistent that the jewelry was gone and they were having a mental and
right.
emotional meltdown. You
Yeah,
don't
they thought
have to
somebody
then
stole it. Somebody's stolen the
somebody
jewelry.
stole
And
it.
of course they
Yeah.
misplaced it.
Yeah. And
So,
so
you
it's
come up
there.
with whatever, actually, do you remember that we took that to the jeweler to have it cleaned?
Yeah. And for the right stage of cognitive decline, that can bring their nervous system down and be healthier for them to not have to have that panic
Right,
and that worry, right?
right. And
Over.
it does kind of reduce, I think it does reduce their anxiety. But if somebody's really all ramped up, like, again, not just dementia, but, COPD, anybody's ramped up and they're going to be, if they need care,
Mhm.
the best thing to do, of course, is create the physical boundary
Mhm.
safely and
Yeah.
walk away until they're calmed down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I imagine also kind of going back to maybe there is no cognitive decline, or it's really early on you're having those discussions, but you're worried about physical safety. Again, with the sandwich approach, I want nothing more than for you to retain freedom and feel independent and do all of these things. Let's talk about some strategies for how you can feel that. And maybe I have X number of days, or between this hour and this hour on these days. Let's go get your hair done. Let's schedule these appointments. Let's go and help them keep their freedom as much as possible, but still keeping it within your boundaries.
Yeah. And I think the thing to realize with anybody that you're caring for, um, whether they have cancer or they have a physical disability or whatever, not a lot of people remember what a teeter-totter is anymore, but it's a long piece of wood, and it might have a little seat with little handles. It may not, just might be a slab of wood with,
Yep.
a little fulcrum in the middle. So I'll do it with one hand. As
Yeah.
safety goes up,
Yeah.
autonomy goes down.
Yeah.
As safety goes down, autonomy goes up. And this is an individual decision for everybody. I will tell you, I just got off a care conference for my father-in-law. They're getting ready to transfer him out of the skilled. And the therapists are always going to say, this is what we recommend. And then the care partner, the caregiver may say, well, nope, that's not going to happen in my house. Like,
Mhm.
I'm not taking doors off. I'm not. And then if they're good, they say, well, we understand that it's your home, it's your environment. We're telling you what our recommendation is.
Mm. Yeah.
And so they're always going to err on the side of safety.
Mhm.
In your own home with your care partner, you may err more on the side of autonomy, or it could be the other way around. But just know they don't go in the same direction.
That's fair. Decision, there's always going to be a sacrifice somewhere. And
Mhm.
and that's just the reality of it. Okay, we have about 9 minutes left. I want to just kind of reframe for us. So why do we have all of these boundaries? Like, what is the point? Ultimately, it's to protect yourself as a caregiver, right? And help you have
Correct.
longevity and
Correct.
things like that during this journey. Are there any final things that you wanted to say about boundaries in general, or maybe how those boundaries shift as your caregiving duties
It
transform?
does shift. And with my own father, with my mother, they went from a phase of, needing more help. My mother became very physically disabled.
Mhm.
And then there's another care transition, which is how do we focus on palliation? Um, and many people will involve hospice. And the focus here now will be, I'm still helping with the caregiving, but somebody else that's going to come in and take care of things that I can't take care of, be it dose pain medicine in a different kind of way, or um, bring in somebody to help with the bathing. You may have done that early on, but it may come trajectory. So that's another caregiving transition at which you're going to need to set boundaries, and their boundaries on yourself. Like, I want them to be palliated. So then what does that mean for hospitalization? Do I want them in the hospital all the time? And so those are boundaries too. And I work with nursing centers, and we talk about that a lot. Um, the family's chosen more of a palliative approach, but they seem to still want them sent to the hospital for everything. So there's a boundary there that you're going to work with your professional caregivers about, how do we maximize palliation and not still be in this other mindset.
Sure. No, I think that's really good advice. Judy dropped a comment here. She said, I like the idea of the list of how people can help me when things start getting difficult with my husband. We talked about that a little bit on this webinar, but we really touched on that in the balance webinar. One of the exercises, or we call them practices, that our advocates often give to caregivers when they're feeling really stretched and like they are the only one and the whole world is on their shoulders, they say, okay, let's find out how true that is. Get out a pen and paper and just brainstorm a list of everyone in your circle, neighbors who you know, family members, friends who might be willing to help, even resources. Like, The Alzheimer's Foundation is one of them. Online resources, online communities, support groups. Make a list, even if you're too scared to approach them or ask them for a question. And when you are in a tough spot, look at the list and just challenge yourself to take advantage of one resource. Ask one question. So thanks for bringing that up, Judy. I thought that was really timely. Okay.
Do you want to, is there any questions in the chat room? If not, I think we promised our participants to learn a little bit more about Steadii and how we can actually provide it to them at no cost at this time.
I am going to pull this up on my screen.
You can see Lita says handling logistics, because for people that know me, I would fail miserably at this part. So this is,
let's not pretend like I'm
their
going to fail.
superpower. This is their superpower here.
That makes me nervous. There you go. So you should see a screen that just says about Steadii. We kept this really simple on purpose, but essentially Steadii is a caregiver support platform. Our bread and butter is caregivers come to us and we match them with an advocate. I like to compare it to like a dating app. You get to kind of pick your advocate, you get to read their bio, see their picture, understand their history, and pick one that you think will align with you and your caregiving style. And then you meet with them. You meet with them over video chat. 1 or 2 times a month. You can reach out to them with direct messages when you have a question. But when we created Steadii, the whole idea was there are a lot of resources, granted, a lot of them are scattered and disorganized, out there on the internet and in the world where you can find how to care for your loved one practically when they have X, Y, or Z challenge. But what was really missing is nobody's there caring for the caregiver. And the reality of becoming a caregiver in this way is that caregivers have higher depression rates, higher suicide rates. They have faster declining physical health, emotional health, mental health, because so much is put on them. And sometimes they don't even realize it until they're too far down that rabbit hole. So the whole idea is to pair you with an advocate who can help prop you up along the way. And Dr. Brooks mentioned something that's very important to us at Steadii is that every caregiver is a little bit different. And we have what's called a caregiving style quiz that you take, and it kind of asks you about your own personal preferences, your belief system, the resources that you have, and it kind of puts lots of things on your personality, and it kind of says, okay, this is the type of caregiver you are, and because we know that information, we can help you care for your loved one in a way that really fits and is personal to you. We're not going to ask you to do something that is somebody else's personality type, because that's not you. And so we really get to know you on that level. If you scan this QR code here, it'll take you to Steadii.com, and you just click the Get Started button. You answer some questions. At first, it takes about 15 or 20 minutes to really get going, because we do ask you a lot of questions because we want to get to know you. But after you're in there, you schedule an appointment with your advocate and you're ready to rock and roll. So we would love to invite anyone to join.
And if you're not a scanner like I am, because I can never figure it out, it's a really easy site, steadii.com, and it's STADII.com /early tester.
Yep. And Jesse just dropped the link in the chat as well, if you want to just click on that and bookmark that page for when you have time. But yeah, it is a free service. We have limited capacity because it's really important to us that our advocates are highly trained, highly qualified, and they get to spend maximum amount of time with you. So every once in a while we have a capacity and can bring new people in, and that's where we're at right now. So that resource is available.
We have anything else from the chat room, Lisa?
I don't think so. Dr. Brooks mentioned 2 different books throughout the webinar, and Jesse has dropped both of those in the chat. We will be careful to include those in the YouTube notes as well, in case people want to take advantage of those. But otherwise,
I love the Strengths Finder thing. I'm just going to plug it.
Yeah.
They didn't pay me to do this. But what I like about the Discover Your Strength is many of us if we're, went to school, education, was it always about fix that C, do better and make it a B,
Yeah.
right? This flips it 180 degrees upside down. There are things you're really strong at, they come naturally. You're always getting an A of those. Why aren't we focusing on that?
Yeah.
And you can't ignore everything else. But this is kind of relevant to caregiving in that I'm not really good with math. But
Yeah.
my friend here, I think she's an analyzer.
Mhm.
Like, I'm going to give her dad's checkbook, you know,
Yeah.
or I'm going to give my brother. It really helps you do the delegating,
Mhm.
but you do learn something about yourself. And that's what I like about it. It's easy. Like I said, I can't read a big, fat, heavy book. I lose my attention span. So this is easy to do. And you take the online test. And when it comes back, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, that is me. It's
Uh-huh.
crazy.
Yeah.
So, and it's not hard to take the test. It's less than a half hour. And they tell you do it on any given day, not when you're too excited or you're too tired, just kind of, and check the box that the first thing that comes to your mind. So I like things that are simple.
No, I like that a lot. That's really good. All right. Well, if anybody has a question after this, feel free to email howdy, HOWDII at steady.com. And we can pass those questions on to Dr. Brooks or answer them ourselves. Thank you everyone for attending. This recording will be available and in your inbox shortly. And thank you, Dr. Brooks, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Sure. I had a great time. I really want to send out strong feelings and wishes and blessings to all the caregivers that are here with us today.
For that. All right, everyone, take good care. Thank you so much.
Bye.